start this meeting. I'd like to start by welcoming you all to a pleasingly crowded, especially considering the rather scarce nature of the agenda, which we'll probably come on to later, meeting of North Area Committee. It's really nice to see you all here on a cold Thursday night. First thing to say is, in the event of a fire bell going off, we're not expecting any drills. Please leave that door and we will assemble on the playground. If you could follow the officers, Tony Birkin and a few of the others are around, they will take you to the right place. Secondly, I think we should move on to the agenda. So I'd like to start by saying, do we have any apologies for absence? Councillor Price.
Or Councillor Scott, Chair.
Any other apologies for absence?
And on Sanya.
Any other apologies for absence? Well, we've already had apologies from Councillor Sells. Apologies for that, I didn't see that.
Apologies.
Okay, so we then move on to declarations of interest. I'm not sure how... filming protocol, yes. There's been a request to film the meeting. As you will have noticed, there were signs off warnings by Sadly. I would ask the person filming to request most people's wish in the crowd not to be filmed. We are filming first. If you don't wish to be filmed and you're speaking to the audience, could you let us know? And we would ask that to be...
Not me, Mum.
Fair enough. Mrs. Speed. Mr. Bond, you normally indicates? Prefer not to be filmed. So if anyone else who is speaking wishes not to be filmed, please let us know. And those two at the back. Anyone else wishing to say they prefer not to be filmed? Anyone actually actively want to be filmed? Absolutely many. So if you take the camera on the... Thank you very much. Anything else I need to do on the housekeeping? I think I've done it. Good. Excellent. I'm getting a thumbs up from the back. So we move on to the minutes to confirm what we said at the last meeting and what we have done. There is a big correction. If you can turn to page 6 of the agenda. Do I mean that? No, I don't. I mean page... I've lost it. Somewhere, Elizabeth. Yes, it is page 6. I was about the first one. Councillor Manning confirmed that the speed tables and white lines on Chesterton High Street should be completed in the next week, not Elizabeth Way. There not being any speed tables on Elizabeth Way. That would have been difficult to get fixed. And while we're on that, please confirm that it's been done.
It has been done.
Yes.
It has been done.
Excellent. Right, so that's an amendment to the minutes. When they are amended, are we satisfied with the minutes that they can be signed off next time with that amendment made? We nod and look enthusiastic, Councillor Price. Yeah, excellent. Brilliant. So that's the minutes. So we also have the action sheet. We've already heard back on Councillor Manning on the speed table. Councillor Burton.
Thanks, Chair. Also on the last minutes, it says here about the view estate. We haven't heard anything. I just wondered if the community manager's got anything to...
What page?
Sorry, page 6 as well.
This is on the estate one?
Yes.
That's what I was just coming on to.
Oh,
But excellent, thank you. That's neatly bridges us in. We are still awaiting feedback. I have... In the last week, me and the committee manager have escalated it. We're going to find out why we haven't heard back, because we are not happy that we haven't heard back in a reasonable time frame. So I'm starting to get annoyed myself as well. So I share your frustration on that. Okay. But yes, basically we haven't heard back. We're hoping to get something for the next meeting. If we don't, I really will be angry, and you will like me when I'm angry. Right, so we have, now we want to be open forum that you want to know. We have quite a large number of questions, which is good. So I'll start with the person who's asked most, so he gets a chance to ask one. And the person, someone has asked two, they'll get one each. And the people who've asked one, actually, we could just go through it. Shall we start with Mr. Taylor? Taylor.
Thank you. Well, I wanted to ask a question on filming, and that was before I heard your announcement just now, and I thought that your announcement at the start of this meeting was excellent and was in line with what the full council has agreed. At the last meeting, though, I was very unhappy with what happened because you created some new rules. You said that individuals who were contributing from the floor could not be filmed, and you requested that the camera be in a fixed position, and I think you also meant that it had to not be panned. Now, the full council unanimously decided not to have such rules, and yet I was surprised to come to this meeting last time and find that they had been imposed. So I'm very happy that things have improved. I think something else that happened at the last meeting was you publicly accused me from the chair of antisocial behaviour for trying to film Councillor Sales when he was voting and contributing to the meeting from the audience. Now, I took that very seriously. You are, I respect all of your offices as councillors, and you're as the chair of this committee, one of the most senior of my local councillors. And when you make that kind of public accusation, I did consider carefully what I was doing, and I think that filming meetings and publicising what goes on at these meetings is not antisocial. It's quite the opposite. It's a positive thing to do. It strengthens local democracy. It can help try and make this area a better place to live, and help make this area contribute better to the city and more widely.
I would just observe in passing, I'm pleased you're happy with the rules I set up today. I had more time to consider them today because I'll be honest, I guessed you were coming after what happened last time, whereas last time I should have expected you to be coming, and I apologise that I didn't expect that. I think I would say that last time there was a feeling from the floor that I sensed that a lot of people didn't want to be filmed. Now, if people want to be filmed, they can do what you've just done, step into the vision of the camera. I certainly didn't say you couldn't pan. If I did, I didn't mean to. I apologise for that. Because obviously you are here to hold us to account, and I think holding us to account is a very important thing, and I welcome you holding us to account. What you are not here to do is to point the camera at a member of the public who has requested not to be filmed. Now, I'm not going to... Actually, I will say I'm mildly irritated that Councillor Sales chose to try and vote from the floor. And when he did vote from the floor, I point out that I immediately asked him to come to the table. He wasn't allowed to contribute to the meeting from the floor because I don't think that's appropriate, especially given you are filming, because actually that was then removed from the record. So I asked him to come to the table. I'm only mildly irritated by that. But I would just say that actually it's one of the few times I've actually got a round of applause in area committee. So I would ask you to reflect on that and how you present yourself on that. But I believe that you have, and I've also thought about what I did, and I think actually I probably overstepped the mark, so I would give you a public apology for that. Mr. Bond, is it on this point?
As somebody who has actually appeared on local and national television, on occasions, and local and national radio, I have no problems in appearing in the media, but I choose when and how I appear. And that's why I'm not happy to have it going into private collection. Because I know the rules apply to media companies, I do not know what rules Mr. Taylor observes. And I don't really need to know. I just prefer not to be. For the record, for 35 years I had no photographs taken of me. At all.
I'll come back to you later, Mr. President, that's okay. Mr. Jennings, would you like to ask one of your two questions?
In the last month, the County Council has produced some illustrative proposals for the cycle routes on Cowley Road, and I'd just like to draw the Council's attention to that. What the County Council promised us was, or indicated in their original planning application, was a high-quality, safe cycle route, and I'll contend that their illustrative proposal is neither. In the first place, they proposed a 3-metre wide shared use scheme on Cowley Road, and I'm sure many of you have had complaints from pedestrians about cyclists on shared routes, and cyclists also don't like shared routes. So shared routes should not be built in this day and age. It's also not high quality because you have to give way 5 times in a quarter of a mile. And I contend it's not safe because of the large number of lorries and buses going down there. I'm sure you're aware there's an aggregates terminal, there's a waste plant and there's a bus depot down there. and in particular cycles are going to have to cross the paths of buses and lorries. As you're aware, also there's been 6 cycle deaths in London in the last 2 weeks, and 5 of those were collisions with lorries and buses. Now we don't know who was the fault in that case. It doesn't mean in those cases it doesn't really matter if you put buses and lorries in the same area. When they come in collision, there are going to be deaths. So I would call on the councillors to support a proposal, or to not support the shared use and call for a better scheme on Cally Road.
Richard probably knows some of this anyway, but I'll say it for the sake of it. And obviously, as the local county councillor for that area, I completely agree with his comments. I think we've got to put it in the context of the station planning application. Anything that goes to the Joint Development Control Committee would normally have an outlying planning application followed by several subsequent stages. The station is all being done in one go because of the timescale involved, and that document, along with a lot of other facets of the station access, including the Mossbank access path, does indicate on it that it's an illustrative proposal. That said, it's not a particularly good illustrative proposal for the very reasons you've outlined. I have talked to Councillor Ian Bates, who's the Cabinet member, informally about this, and I would hope that we can either get that diagram changed, removed, or some sort of clear statement that that is not the final case, and I'll do everything I can to make that happen.
Does anyone have a dissenting voice on that? Are we happy with what Councillor? I think you have the board supports, but I can't say more. Hester Wells.
Hello. My question is, what plans are there for education and enforcement of the new 20-mile-per-hour zones that are coming in at the beginning of next year? Particularly given that the police have a history of not enforcing 20 miles per hour, for example on Maid's Causeway, and given the success or otherwise of the zone, the North Area zone, will affect the consultations in the other 3 areas.
I think that's one for Councillor.
Yes, the local more junior officers in what they've been putting in writing have been a bit cautious in what they have and haven't been promising to do, because they don't want to raise expectations too far. They don't want us to end up believing that there will be policemen with a speed radar on every street corner, because there won't be. The Chief Constable has told councillors that the 20-mile-an-hour limit will be enforced, and the Police and Crime Commissioner has told another area committee that the 20-mile-an-hour limit will be enforced. And what we've been told slightly more definitely than that is it will be enforced to the same degree as 30 miles an hour, which means that you will not be getting special people on every street corner. But then in addition there will be extra enforcement according to particular local needs. This scheme, as it rolls out across the city, will probably help Maid's Causeway, because one of the problems with Maid's Causeway and various other 20 zones in the city at the moment is that there's a fairly random mixture of 20 and 30 limits across the city. There are 20 limits where the local people have been successful in the campaign to get them imposed, and motorists are probably some of the time when they're doing 30 through Maid's Causeway genuinely unaware of the 20 limit, because they've been watching the traffic and not the street furniture. And once people get used to the idea that it's 20 pretty much everywhere, the theory is, and we'll see how well this turns out, but the theory is that more people will be obeying more of it more of the time.
On the note of the Police and Crime Commissioner talking to other area committees, he was supposed to be here this evening. It was one of the items that fell off what looked like a hugely full agenda and turned it into the rather limp effort we have in front of us. He has promised us, has he, or have we not got promised yet? He assured us. He has promised, unless he gets a better offer, to come to the February meeting, and that will be one of the items when he eventually turns up. We will ask him about, and I hope it will be the February meeting. Anyone got anything else to add on enforcement of our council manager?
I was just going to say, for any of the county councillors here who were here when the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner appeared at the county council, we should definitely make sure we get not the deputy, as it wasn't a particularly satisfactory series of answers he gave.
Not a lot I can say to that, is there? Anyone else on this item? Okay, thank you very much. Lil Speed.
Can I speak without the mic? First of all, I want to correct the minutes. It says here that I raised a concern that Councillor Kerr did not live in the ward. She doesn't live in this ward. She lives in Gilbert Road, as far as I know, unless she has skipped into Chesterton. Chairman Councillor Pitt interjects, "We've already approved the minutes." Lil Speed continues, "My point on this was, I wasn't being nasty to her. This is a meeting where people bring their concerns. My concern was people don't see her, people don't hear of her. And she doesn't come to any of the events. In Chesterton, and you know, what does she? I know she works. I know all of you work. But I've noticed in the past with Mike that me and Lil have got on okay. And we've done walking in the streets and have got some things done. But now I've come to the conclusion that the Lib Dems do not listen to people. And this is what you should be doing. Listen to the people and not decide what you want to do on your own. Listen, let the people decide. Now those flats in Water Lane, they look an eyesore. If they are not coming down until next year possibly, why are they empty and boarded up? Why couldn't the people still live there? And now the council are crying out for one-bedroom places. Now you want to build less on that ground of all private houses. Are you so concerned about students and cycles instead of being concerned what the people want? And that is my argument.
I think there are a couple of questions in there, Councillor.
Oh, and by the way, I don't know if you want to see with me. You might do. My husband wrote a letter to Mr. Manning and to Mr. Brick on the 6th of November. He has not had a reply of that letter. Not one line of that letter has been replied. You can read the letter, I have got a copy here. And also, at the last meeting I came, it was my first meeting. And afterwards, a few weeks afterwards, I was told on Twitter that Mr. Manning said that Claire and Jerry put me up to go into the meeting. Now that is wrong, because nobody tells me what to do. Or what to say. I'm my own boss. Not even my husband dares do that. So I think Mr. Manning should apologise.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Manning indicated to speak.
I was just going to make a comment on the reference to Water Lane. Which is, I don't know the exact timescale for it happening, but I actually have incidentally been in contact, if it does go on under a very long timescale, with a social enterprise company that actually specialise in cases like that and keeping them occupied. So, you know, if it's a short timescale, it won't be relevant, but on a longer timescale, it may well be. On the other hand, I'm not going to respond to an allegation about something that isn't true. So, in terms of the actual reply to the letter, I received the letter last week. I haven't replied yet. I'm sorry, I haven't had time. But you will get a reply.
It's not me who wants to reply, it's me husband's. It's nothing to do with me. Also...
In which case your husband will get a reply.
No.
Also, I want to say that in the paper this...
Because I'd like to let people respond to the first round before we lose track of what you said the first time. Councillor Cole.
No, I'm very happy to walk around with you if that was an invitation to do so. Then more than happy to. If you want to discuss my living arrangements, I prefer to do that in private if no one minds. I don't think it's something that really concerns this committee. And on the Water Lane flats, Councillor Bird and Councillor Price and myself are on a working group, and I'm sure we have a meeting tomorrow, and we could, if it's not already on the agenda, I'm sure we can ask for an update on the plans for the houses that are going on that site, so we can find out exactly where that's got to.
Thank you. Right. My last question is... In the paper of 2 weeks ago, I read about Marjorie. And the accusation was made it was Claire and it was Jerry. Now, if a councillor is going to make those stupid accusations to other people, then she should resign. And you should be the one what says, you go, we don't want councillors in East Chesterton. Who like that, and I don't think she is in East Chesterton. In any case, you know? The only one I see walking around is Jerry. I don't know how she's going to respond. But I think she should go.
I would point out that the allegations are subject to various procedures, and that will limit what people can perhaps say in public at this stage on these items. I'm also very uncomfortable speaking any further on this because it's not a matter that I know anything about, need to know anything about, or want to know anything about. Councillor Todd Jones, would you like to add anything, or anyone else?
Well, I just want to point out that we have three East Chesterton councillors here on East Chesterton matters that relate to, I meant City Council, apologies, Councillor Manning. On those matters, they are all quite willing to speak about issues that is within their remit and they're leading upon. And I'm quite happy to invite any of our East Chesterton councillors to make any point about casework or issues that are not in confidence and are relevant to the ward and to address you, Mrs. Speed. So that's really all I can say about it at the moment, and it's up to East Chesterton Council to make their point about any particular East Chesterton issues that are raised by you or anyone else tonight, which are pertinent, relevant and appropriate.
Thank you.
Move on to Labour Dockful. A perennial favourite.
Excuse me, I don't want the camera on me. I'm not on EastEnders. Thank you.
You should be good on EastEnders.
Yeah, it's about recycling. In the area of St Kilda Avenue. Chairman Councillor Pitt interjects to say he can't hear. Recycling in our area. I know we've got 2 councillors here, but I don't see them very often. I agree with Lil. I'm the one who phones up every time there is a problem, and I'm getting sick and tired of this. And I know the roofs were supposed to have been done sometime last year, but have been postponed to the next climate meeting. But I'm quite distraught because when we have the roofs done, I want to have it put somewhere else. Because I thought I'd go to the shop, on the people, because there are foxes in the area now as well, and see them tied up against the wall, because as it is, looking a mess. I know, because I'm a recycling person. I'm one of the champions. I know people do dump rubbish, and we can't get them okay, but I'm sorry, the council's paid. It's paid enough council tax. So it pick that okay. I'm not very happy about the way it is. The shop, and by the Tesco's around the corner, I hope that when you do the new roofs, it is going to look a bit better. Because it's it's a mess.
Clarify, you're asking whether we could move the recycling depot that's currently by the Tesco's on Camkin Road the recycling is in
And
St
can
Paul
I-
Avenue, but
Yes, please. And also, when I came back from Wales on Monday, my neighbour says, I live round the corner, we've had these big drums. I don't know if they're from the Chinese shop or not, of oil. Is it rinsed, rape? Oil, that's right, and I've been to the Chinese restaurant and said, is it yours? They said no, it's not. Then they said it had been stolen from them. But then they didn't come to pick it up, and it's still lying there now. Now I think the Chinese people need to ask, what exactly is it they're up to? Because they wouldn't tell the police, and they told me that it came from them, so we need to know what is going on at the Chinese restaurant.
I think that last one, I'll let people count, but I think we'll just ask if we can refer that to the ranger, because it does sound like tipping and needs to be investigated. So I'll ask the city rangers to investigate. Councillor Price has indicated.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Labour, I think two area committee meetings ago or so, you said that you never see your councillors in the ward, which I refuted then and I refute now, that I see you and you see me and you tell me what you don't like about, and in particular about the rubbish in the area by the Tesco on Captain Road opposite the pub, which I have dealt with and had rubbish removed. But the problem seems to be that as fast as we get rubbish removed from there, it comes back. Somebody else decides that it's their area to dump their rubbish. I wasn't aware of the drums of oil at the back of the shops. If the rangers are dealing with that, then fine. I'll happily look into that. But I do think that coming here and saying that you never see your councillors is marginally unfair. I mean, I don't mind if you say I see that Kevin Price and he's useless. That's one thing. But you do see me. You do ask me to get stuff done, and I do get stuff done.
Hold on. Can I give you please?
Just a minute. You heard it here first. Councillor Kevin Price is useless. Would you like to come back?
The councillor told me that when I phone up the council, it comes better from me than it does him. Because I get more response. No, I don't. The last time I phoned up, apparently when I phoned up, a certain person went over to somebody and said something to them, not very nice, about me, and I want to know what it was. And that person was, I think it's the name of a junior council officer. And I haven't seen him yet, but when I see him, I'm going to ask him what he said about me. In confidence to somebody, because I know I heard. This is now not about him, but about recycling, okay? And he said something about me, and I don't know what it was. I need to know what he said about me the last time I phoned up. We need to find out what he's been saying about me if I'm phoning up about something and complaining. I'm a tenant, I have a right to complain, I pay council tax. I don't think that I should hear someone come to me and say, have you heard what he said? I want to know what he said, and when I see him, I will ask him. Because I don't like people talking behind my back. I'm Welsh. And I'm open and straightforward, so if Kevin wants to phone up about something, recycling, then he should do it. I'm not going to do it all the time because it's my phone bill. Okay, thank you very much.
Taking this one with the Wells earlier. Shirley Fieldhouse, can you bring the microphone?
Yes, this actually relates somewhat to the question that Hester Wells raised about 20-mile-per-hour speed limits. But I wanted to bring to your attention that on the 10th of October this year, the Association of Chief Police Officers issued what they call refreshed, I would say updated, but guidance on speed enforcement. And that guidance actually has, I think, a new section on 20-mile-per-hour zones. And the guidance gives a range of options when apprehending drivers who have infringed the regulations. It also gives the factors to be taken into account in deciding how many resources should be devoted to enforcement, which actually does relate back to how much enforcement is taking place on Race Causeway. I commend to the councillors and to police officers, but there aren't any here today, to familiarise themselves with the document. And I do have a copy here printed out. And the new guidance says a speed awareness course should be offered to a driver going over 24 miles per hour if it is their first offence, and summons in all cases over 34 miles per hour in the 20 mile per hour zone. As speed awareness courses are generally found to be very effective at modifying driver behaviour, is the Cambridgeshire Police proposing to set up speed awareness courses for drivers breaking the 20 mile per hour speed limit?
The City Council welcomes this change of guidance from ACPO, which we think is a step in the right direction, and we hope it's a response to our lobbying of government and ACPO, but we can never tell these things. In answer to your specific question, I do not know what the Cambridgeshire Police are planning. The last I heard was that they were thinking about it. There is a 20 mile an hour project board meeting next week, so I'll make sure I find out what stage their thinking or plans are at.
I was just going to suggest, Chair, that we actually, you as Chair of the North Area Committee, write to the local police and ask them to set 20 mile an hour enforcement as a priority the next round, because it will be the next round, I believe, that it's up, am I right, aren't I, the next period, when it's actually implemented. Whenever the next period is implemented, we ask formally as an area committee that we want it set as a priority.
The last I heard a week or so ago was that the contract for putting up the lines and signs was out to tender, so I don't have an installation date yet, but I'll find that out next week as well, I expect.
I'm certainly happy to write, if the committee would agree that we would like the police to enforce the 20 mile per hour limit when it comes in, and to consider it as a priority. And I'm seeing nodding, so I will get a letter written to that effect. Excellent. Anyone else on that? No, thank you very much for that. That's
really wasn't the main point, was whether they're setting up speed enforcement courses as an option for people to take instead of having a fine. That was really what I was trying to express.
I think you already exist in this area, doesn't it?
That's what we specifically welcome, because the previous situation where you could only get a speed awareness course for breaking a 30 limit but not a 20 limit was complete nonsense, which is why we've been pressing government and ACPO to change it.
And that they do exist. I'm aware of a colleague at work whose wife went on a speed awareness course instead of getting points on her licence. I don't think I've said anything that allows you to identify that person. Mr. Bond, and you requested not to be filmed. So.
Thank you. Yeah, we're back to the city too. You've not heard of this for a long time. But after it's been rerouted, ostensibly to improve the timekeeping, it now seems to be back to its erratic frequencies. This morning I walked along to Mitcham's Court. There were queues at every bus stop I walked past, and I was tempted to, I did, quip to a friend. It is called a stop, but it is quicker by feet. But I think it was brought on to me a couple of weeks ago, when I came back from St Ives, not on the usual bus. And wanted to make a change at the science park. The indicators at the science park were giving some quite bizarre information. Being about 3:30 in the afternoon, it told me it was 5:30. Then it told me it was 6:30. Then it told me there were 2 buses coming along in 17 minutes' time. Then it did some other peculiar thing. Eventually, however, I just waited, and I was a bit puzzled. And a bus arrived, and I said, "Why are we waiting?" And he said, "Well, I'm on time." 2 others pulled up behind us. One of them then shot off in front, and then mine pulled away, so presumably one of the others was behind time. Was at least 10 minutes behind time behind us, and I think it's about time that we had Mr. Campbell come along and explain what the new problem is. Because clearly he ain't solved the old one.
I'm more than happy, I'll add it to my list, to write to Mr. Campbell to invite him along. We'll talk about items for future agendas, but the bus has always been a popular issue. I have a feeling, though, that he has changed his view on attending area committees, having come to one too many North areas and found them rather robust. But I will ask him, he normally attends the 20 mile per hour steering group or centre deputy, So I'll ask him at that meeting, and I'll also write to him as you request to invite him along, and we'll talk about other possible agenda items next time.
He's going to East Area.
Is he going to East Area now? Oh, in which case we'll definitely try it. Thank you.
I'll get in there.
Maybe they're softer. I find it hard to believe. Isn't East Area any softer than any other area committee? So we've got
We can't even agree amongst ourselves.
And I understand South Area is going to East Area to talk to them, so we can all.
They are very well behaved.
Is it just me that thinks that's a nice? No, right. Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Wall. Mr. Drummond, is that correct? Yes. You're poster over there, which I draw people's attention to. What would you like to?
Class Bowman, my name, and I would like to speak to you seeking support for a proposal and petition to improve Nufford Road in the context of the Science Park station. This proposal is supported by the Old Chesterton Residents Association, by the Fen Estate and Nufford Road Association, by the V Residents, and by the Cambridge Cycling Campaign. Nufford Road should become one of the main routes for walking and cycling to the Science Park. Science Park station, so unfortunately the proposed layout includes several right-angle turns. One of these is across the path of turning lorries on Nufford Road, which is, you can see it from here, but it's basically you would come out of the school, turn right and continue past the access to the allotments. So their lorries will turn left, while cyclists will turn right to access the path to the Science Park station. That is a dangerous crossover and should be avoided. I would like to seek your support for an improvement that would see Nufford Road residential section cut off at that point for motorised through traffic, so that is just past Discovery Way, and then the industrial section of Nufford Road should be accessed from Milton Road via Nufford Close and the first section of the new unguided busway. This would require a crossing design that allows vehicles to turn into or out of Milton Road, and from Milton Road to Nufford Close section of the new busway to be built to highway standards rather than a busway. This could be made a planning condition if you wish, in order to keep this option open as the area develops further, which it certainly will. Linking the trading estate more directly to Milton Road would not only reduce the commercial traffic past this school here, which clashes with the school run, it would also reduce the number of LGVs and HGVs on Green End Road, most of which, 3/4 of which, turn right north towards the A14 and A10, which is where this proposal would actually get them directly. As councillors, you're responsible for maximising the council's income out of council-owned commercial property. The City Council owns properties on the trading estate, and you should compare our land, it is our land value, and rent to those achieved by the neighbouring Crown Estate business park. With the access we propose, which would be right next door to the Crown Estate Cambridge Business Park, we would expect that the council's commercial properties on that road will increase in value. I urge you therefore to support our petition to link the trading estate to Milton Road, where most of the drivers of goods vehicles want to go. There are lists, if anybody wants to start signing, it will go live on the County Council website, or petition website tomorrow. If anybody's interested to inspect the area after the meeting or another day, I'm happy to take you and go with you.
Just adding to class notes, I fully support this as a principle. It's worth the other councillors just knowing the head of the Shirley School, we've described this in detail, and she supports the concept. It's particularly important because it would potentially allow access from the Fen Road area to the Shirley School to be significantly safer. And also we did a survey of all the local businesses down there and arranged a meeting where class did a presentation to them. Only 3 turned up, but actually in retrospect I thought it was probably quite a good thing, because if businesses want to oppose something, they probably will turn up. But the 3 that turned up were supportive. I had several of them reply after that, and the only real one that would be most affected by this is Ridgeons, and they did eventually say that they wouldn't object to it. So it's not like this is this has got local support. I would say, having been involved in the station project, it's going to be quite hard to persuade the county council to do this because of the way the station project is being funded. But one thing is to try and press, which is what I'm trying to do, to make sure that the guided busway isn't guided, because that may be the sort of compromise we could get out of this, which would mean at some point in the future this could still happen. If the busway ends up being guided for that section after Milton Road, this is never going to happen.
Thank you, Chair. I was slightly jumping the gun, really, but just to say that on my own little list of items for North Area Committee, we should be looking into one of the things that I was acutely aware with Bob Mingley came at least 2-3 meetings ago, and an update was promised on the Science Park station and all issues related to that area. So that's something I hope we're going to get onto very shortly.
Yes, I did decide to let the open forum overrun because there's a few more questions to get through, and I thought this was worthwhile.
Just on Councillor Todd Jones' point, the reason that hasn't happened is because the planning application hasn't gone to committee yet, and is looking like now the earliest it will go is December. So I think until that's happened, it's we won't know what we're discussing.
Okay, thank you very much. John Hall.
It's going to be very brief because and a somewhat repeat what's already been said, but I just want to say on the 20 mile an hour limit, I've never seen a police officer enforce any speed limit within Cambridge. I go into Cambridge several times a day, almost every day. I don't know whether anyone else has seen a police officer enforce the speed limit. Has anyone? Well, you use cameras, but everyone knows where the cameras are, and they speed where the cameras aren't. So what we need, and there's a threshold below which people will continue to speed. They need to feel their colour might be felt, otherwise nothing will happen, basically. So there's no point in doing a minimalistic enforcement, because it will be ignored, and it is ignored, and that's ignored by all classes of drivers, basically. So could the councils please ask the police to make sure that their enforcement exceeds that threshold, above which we'll get some change, because people in this area have voted for that through democracy, haven't they? So the other thing I'd like to support is the other proposal by Class, and also about the need for cyclists who are vulnerable to these huge lorries. They need to be protected by hardware, by thinking and planning, because there are all sorts of ages and abilities of people and nationalities of people in Cambridge, some of whom cycle on the wrong side of the road because they can't remember which side to go on, unfortunately. And also because they come from countries where it's normal to cycle on the other side of the road. Like in China, they cycle on all sides of the road in all directions, for instance. So, I'm not surprised they don't do it here. So, I think we need to protect people by design, and that means giving cyclists priority at side roads over these huge vehicles. Cyclists are generally quiet and clean and green, and it's good for your health, and it's enjoyable, and it makes you feel better. So why don't we give people the opportunity to do that? Thank you. I think cyclists need to behave as well.
Any further comments? I think we've basically indicated that we are going to try and get decent enforcement so that there is a noticeable impact on the speed limit, and we will, in the past, about trying to design things in. Fitting things into Cambridge, however, is never as easy as we would like, but we are open to ideas. Mr. Bond, is this on this point?
Yes, it is closely related. One of the problems of Cambridge is that it does insist on bringing traffic to a stop every few hundred yards. If you are going to make a success of the 20 mile an hour limit, you should take out almost all of the sets of traffic lights across it, because at 20 miles an hour it is possible to share the roads more effectively. And surprise, surprise, experience elsewhere shows that when you do take all the fairy lights out, accidents do tend to go down, rather than up, because people are travelling at a speed where they can stop. Stopping distance at 20 is a lot shorter than it is at 30. Also, to some extent, it becomes more self-regulating. And those of you who have seen the video which was shown at the introductory thing, shows that sensible traffic engineering replacing lights, which actually causes as much problem of congestion as anything else. I discovered this when several sets of lights were put on Gonville Place, Field Road, and my journey to my polling station at 6:30, which used to take me 5 minutes, then took 10.
Yes, the research does show that you can increase the capacity of junctions, T-junctions, and so on by reducing the speed limit, because that means that people are more able to pull out in gaps, so there'll be less stop-starts than there is at the moment if that research turns out to apply to Cambridge. As far as removing traffic lights is concerned, I rather feel that you're going to have to wait for the normal three-year period for the County Council to collect its statistics and be persuaded that that might actually work, because their reflex would be for their normal safety culture to kick in, which is that if I take down a traffic light and somebody gets hurt, then I'll need to get sued or prosecuted.
Okay, now everyone's had one question, so we've overrun. What I'm going to do is say, if we could have quick answers, if possible. If anything is too important, we will go into more detail, but I'm just mindful that we don't want to drag on too much further. I've got two more from Mr. Taylor. We might as well take them both at the same time, even though they're completely unrelated.
Okay, so this is a question that I raised at the last meeting of this committee, but I didn't get any answer from councillors, so I'm here to ask it again. I'd like to have a response from councillors. And this is that in the north of the city, a lot of the cycle signage has deteriorated, so it's illegible, or in lots of cases it's disappeared completely. And I've raised this in particular in relation to Milton Road and Campkin Road, and I've reported via Fix My Street in public to the County Council lots of examples of areas where the cycle signage isn't present. In the past I've raised it as a particular problem because you've prioritised tackling cyclists who are doing things including cycling on the pavements in areas where the police, and I think lots of councillors agree, the signage isn't very good. So what I want to find out is will any councillors actually support getting the cycle signage improved? I know you've taken it off as a police priority at the moment, although you've got the general one about dangerous cycling. But another concern I've got is that you get people coming to this committee reasonably regularly complaining about cycling on pavements. I think that sometimes it's not clear where a pavement is shared use or not, and that confusion could lead to people complaining about cycling on pavements when in fact it's perfectly legal. Okay, so this is it's actually about what I'd like you to do in the future meetings. I'd like you to consider violent crime in the area a bit more carefully. In particular, the type of violent crime that's in public on the streets of this area. There have been a couple of cases earlier this year. One in July on Milton Road near the Woodhead Drive junction when someone was assaulted and knocked out, and the recent case has got lots of coverage on High Street, Chesterton. Now, at the moment, before you consider the police priorities, you're looking at statistics which include in violent crime all sorts of things. You don't separate out sort of violent crime in public from domestic violence, for example. I think you should treat that separately, and I'd also like you to be looking at the injury statistics. These two cases were things where people were very seriously injured, and you're not getting details of the severity of crime-related injuries. I think it would be very useful if you got that in future, and it would enable you to consider that when you're setting the police priorities. You could also get maps back again, for example, just so that you've got all the information that you could possibly get to make a really well-informed decision on the police priorities.
Okay, those points have been noted. Any comments on those, especially the cycle signage? I think Councillor Manning is still lucky day.
I was just going to say that I've mentioned this before. It's kind of on both points. The police priorities. I'm with Sergeant Bragg, trying to come up with a review of how police priorities are set. It's not anything, I think I've told Richard this before, it's not anything that is worth publishing yet because it's not finished, but I've engaged the Centre for Science and Policy at the university, and they're going to be doing some work to try and flesh it out there, and then hopefully at some point I'll take it back to this committee for comment or agenda item. So it doesn't address directly the points you've made, but I agree with all the ones about the stats not being good enough, and that's just the point I made at the last area committee when we set these priorities, which I know not everyone agreed with me. In fact, no one agreed with me. But the point being that it's to try and be constructive and come up with a better way of doing it. It's clear that the statistics is not, in my view, particularly valid.
That was all the try. Okay, anything else on that or on the other one? Yes, that's fine.
Just a brief point, I suppose, Chair, on the... One would assume that the police would have violent crime as something of a priority anyway. And I'd be somewhat surprised to hear that they don't. I think what we do here as this committee, when we're setting the priorities that we see as best for the area, they're things that are outside the things that I actually want them taking totally seriously and totally as a priority, like violent crime. You know, for me, that's something they don't need to come here and ask me what I think and should they be dealing with violent crime. They should be dealing with it anyway.
I think just to follow up on that, we're setting the priorities for the neighbourhood team and those officers who are coming in to support the neighbourhood team. I remember a while ago we asked them could we have burglary as a priority, and they said, well, you can, but it won't mean anything because actually that's a city-wide priority. By all means we need to consider that and make sure we send that message that if we want to, but I do think we need to look at it. We're only a part of the jigsaw, and that's my understanding. It seems to be matched with Councillor Francis. Councillor Ward.
Thank you. On the issue of cycle signage, I just wanted to say that I had actually sent an email to Evan Loughlin, copying in Donald Peebles, and they said that they were going to go round and investigate and have a look at the signage and see which ones needed repairing and come back to me on that. So I'm happy to follow that up and chase them up to see where they are and when they did their site visits.
Could you also point them, they should all be aware of it, could you also point them Mr Taylor's reports as well? Good, so have done that. Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. Mr Jennings, your final one, and that's the last one.
This week, Living Street has been calling for an extension of just 3 seconds on the timing for pedestrian crossings, signal crossings. Would the councillors like to push the county to extend the times on the crossings in this area and in the city?
Have you met Mr Boggs? Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with you. I think they do need extending. A lot of people, when they're trying to cross, especially the elderly, when they're trying to get across, they only get halfway and suddenly it's going back where the traffic can go past. So I think this could be a priority we should really push on. All over the city, actually.
Any other comments? There's a few coming from the floor. I'll go to the floor first, Mr Bonds, and then Mrs. Ken.
The problem about the short time allowed is actually more serious because a lot of motorists actually do try to go through at the last minute, and many actually cross on the red rather than green, and that short time available to cross.
Yes, I did rather frivolously refer to this when someone tried to assure me that cars don't run red lights in Cambridge, and they sure as heck do while I'm driving. Well, not me, I listened to it. Came out very wrong.
This is an ongoing thing that we've been talking with the County Council about via ECMA for quite some time. The problem being is that the lights turn red, but there's a gap for traffic to stop. Then there is the quick piece where you've got to do across the road in 30 seconds. Again, people are still walking across the road, but the lights are still red. The traffic isn't going to go anywhere for a few more seconds. But they have been looking at the timings quite well. What started this was one on Histon Road where the co-op is. That's Mike, you know that one. And apparently there was a elderly lady almost hit, and she made a great deal of fuss about it. So the timings on Pelican crossings, etc., are being looked at, and they are being altered.
Yes, just to say that a crossing near Kingsway Flats, across Carlton Way, which I think we managed to achieve a great victory with, and added 2 seconds to the core time. in which you can cross, and then they mysteriously disappeared again. Back to about 12 or 14 seconds, or I think 14 seconds actually was what it added to. But yes, the County Council Highways Office often would argue that you have this transition time either side when the lights are amber and so forth. But whether you can, it's the criteria that they go by for the core time, I think, that needs to be somehow amended. So whether our county councillors can somehow persuade highway officers or whoever in the county council to actually seriously address this and change perhaps the core time, crossing time, then I think that's probably the solution.
Well, moving on to the next item on the agenda, we could try asking the County Council for a report at least on the policy, and if it's easy enough for them to pull off the numbers, what the timings are for all the nights in the North area for the future meeting.
Excellent, and that brings us nicely on to the next item on the agenda. The way I'm going to do this, we have 3 items that look quite substantial on the agenda this evening, and for various reasons, none of them actually made it to the agenda. I won't bore you with the details, but we did think that as people are here, and I'm very pleased to see such a huge turnout, it's wonderful. We thought we'd ask the public for ideas, and I think the best way of doing this is if we get down off our high table and come and sit amongst people in small groups, and I'll give people 10 minutes to have discussions on the tables, come up with some ideas, and then we'll feed it back at the end from the table just to let people know what the suggestions are, see if we come up with any. So, 10 minutes, off we go. I would ask, okay, has everyone done their homework? Good. Could I ask people at this stage if there's any particularly good or urgent or nice ideas that came up on their tables, and then we'll collect in all the ideas and I will we'll discuss them offline to work out which ones are appropriate. But at this stage, what particularly good ideas for agenda items, other than Stagecoach coming, and what's the other thing I've already agreed to?
Well, I've got our table.
You got our table? Okay, will someone feedback from that table then? Can you give it to Councillor Bird, please?
I'm going to read my writing.
Oh, and the County Council report on traffic lights. Yeah. Okay, so the top ideas. Someone.
I don't read my writing.
That's true. Okay, just this once, I'll let Mrs. Blair speak for Councillor Bird. I think I'm in trouble later.
On this, is this working?
Yes.
On this table, we agreed with Andy Campbell coming to see. We very much agreed with the timing crossing priority. We wanted to have a report from the county on general highway repairs, in particular the sort of time lag. We also wanted a separate one to talk about maintenance of pavements, the county approach towards things like tree roots when they're in cycleways and pavements, and how they were rolling out. There was an interest in having a report on dual-use crossings, which are the ones like the Gresham Place, where you have both cyclists and pedestrians crossing separately. And for the city, the report we would want from the city was a presentation we put from Trevor Williams, but it would be from whoever, on Brownsfield. Lil has had a meeting with him there, and the plans to base chips there and youth work across the north of the city. So, if that's useful, those are the key ones that we came up with.
Thank you. Actually, I was going to say I asked for one item, but actually they're all good ideas. So I'm kind of, it's a typical teacher thing, I want to tell you off, but actually I have to say, well done on that table. I've got my stamp in my bag, I'll clear me afterwards for a well done stamp. Who was on the back table? Back table with Councillor O'Reilly.
Thank you, Jim. The inviting Andy Campbell was on our list as well, and we also have something from County Highways officers talking about pavement road maintenance. There was a lot of County Highway officers to talk to us. Another question that was raised was there's been S106 transport workshops in the North area, and there's been input from councillors across the north area, the northern corridor, and it would be quite nice to actually get some feedback in public for that. I think because we've had that.
I believe that's on board now.
If that's coming up, then brilliant.
I think that's all it. But
the last one that we had was, again, county officers to come and talk to us about residential parking, kind of strategic policy relating to residential parking, if such a thing exists.
I was going to say that assumes one exists. Be careful saying things like that, otherwise just to council. Okay, going across the King's Hedges table, is that Councillor Price feeding back? Or, Councillor Muldoon?
It's working. The priorities that came from the King's Hedges table were play areas, replanting and footpaths, and the recycling centre at by Tesco's. It was moved and it's been moved back, and I think the general consensus is that they want to put it back where it was moved to in the first place. The play areas, it was not. Well, the question was, although the Hawkins Road play area has been approved for spending, no, we don't seem to have any designs or timetable for that. And the footpaths within the area seem to be in disrepair, and they need looking at as well.
Okay.
Thanks for that. One of the things when we were talking about footpaths was actually yellow lines.
Okay.
How we can put forward, for yellow lines to be put into place and the priority for them.
Okay.
And the other thing that we were talking about was cycle paths. Correct cycle paths, not where you get a road, then you suddenly get a piece of well, that's a cycle path. Then it goes off and you've got another piece of, and they go on the pavement. Cambridge City, we are told, has the most cyclists in the eastern area. That I can quite believe. But we have no decent cycle paths. No, really, I just go out of control over it, I'm afraid. But I would like to see correct cycle paths. Other countries have most brilliant cycle paths and systems. This country, right down the bottom. Thank you.
I don't know what's happening debate this evening. Councillor Ward, obviously this will be quick, this may be this joke.
This is my joke, Ethan. Yeah, no, I was having meetings with people in the pub the other day, one of whom was a graduate student from Holland. And she said, yes, cycle provisions are better in Holland, but Cambridge is incomparably better than everywhere else in the UK, which she's trying to say. So it could be worse.
Best of a bad lot, you heard it here. Was that the joke? Thank you for that joke. Jolly good. Moving on, who had the... Councillor Drummond.
Thank you, Chair. I was just thinking actually that maybe the fewer and fewer items we have on the agenda, the larger and larger sort of representation the public will get. So this is really good meeting. Ditto all the above some things that have been mentioned. In terms of a report back on the Northern Corridor air transport plans, and that, I think that's something which certainly needs to be done. We haven't had a report back in public, as Councillor O'Reilly has said, for some while. Otherwise, I think all the other things that have been mentioned are on my list. We did discuss a couple of other very interesting issues, but they're not really very particularly relevant to housing issues, for example. They're relevant to this meeting, but otherwise, everything else I've got on my list has already been mentioned.
Frontline table, who was on Yep.
So we were talking, I think, more generally about what could be on every agenda, actually, not just next agenda. So recording any issue that's been brought up, keeping that on a list that gets brought back every time, even if there's no update for that particular meeting that can be given, but just so that things don't fall away and we sort of forget about them. So just having a probably more comprehensive list that we can all see each time. Something more generally about what's happening in the community, so any particular events or things that members want to raise, just having that as a section. And some way of people who can't make this meeting but who still want to contribute being able to do that online, which would obviously need to be managed and promoted and thought about in quite a lot more detail, but just so that people don't have to actually come here and can still get involved.
If they don't actually want to attend, my thought would be if they email their local councillor, because it sounds like it's casework, and if there's a wider issue, then the councillor can possibly bring it up. I'm reluctant to try and spend money we don't have setting up some complicated system. There is also the Shapley Place website that does go somewhere to addressing that. So I said I was going to have the meeting, didn't I? On the action list, we do actually have the action list each week. Thank goodness it's not each lead meeting. Can I just urge councillors to check it and check that there's nothing falling off it, because that's the point. And I'm now thinking actually Mr. Taylor's comments about cycle pass, which he's brought up at every meeting, probably ought to have been on the action list for someone. It probably will be this time because I've just mentioned it. But you're going to throw things over the table for you lot. It's someone else's fault. Excellent. Right, front and centre. Who was on that table? Councillor Mann.
So it was quite, surprisingly enough, quite cycle themed, even the people sitting on the table. Update on the Fen Road stuff, the new proposed cycle project, the river, the station, which we've already talked about, and then one that I put in for a bit of balance, which is an update on the new primary school, which I should probably declare an interest as a governor, but I think it will be quite interesting to hear how that's getting on next year. And the final point that someone made was to make sure the 20-mile-an-hour limit, when it's brought in, to make sure there's collection of speed data afterwards to see how things have changed. I don't know if Tim can answer that.
Yes, we're going to be having automatic traffic counters back after it's gone in, and I'll encourage the Chair to make sure this gets brought back to this committee when the numbers are out.
Okay, is there anything significant or important that people could add to that excellent list? Brilliant. Can I just thank everyone for coming?
Excuse me, can I just ask a question? I object to having a camera here. I do not want to have a camera in here being filmed. We are not on EastEnders. Or Coronation Street. Mr. Taylor, he should ask us first before he brings a camera in. If the council has it in, fair enough, but as he's only a tenant, I object to it. One of the things I was going to say was that I think every table has mentioned footpaths or roads. I think that these should be one of our main priorities. I think that we should remember that everybody thinks that either the city or the county is responsible for them. Both the city and the county have ownership of our footpaths.
As Taylor said, it isn't simple, but I certainly think that I spotted that highway maintenance in the broadest sense does seem to be the big thing. Thank you all very much for coming. It's been a very interesting meeting, much better than we deserved from the agenda. I'm very pleased to see such a huge crowd, and I'm just going to stop blabbering now and let you go home. Thank you very much.